Hello there, people of the internet. Today we are going to dive into the 1911. This is a video series I'm doing where I'm trying to earn my way up to 100,000 subscribers. So if this video earns you a subscription, fantastic, glad to have you aboard. If it does not, then maybe I'll try again tomorrow, because I'm trying to go through and observe basically everything in my arsenal, talk about the history and development, and do some range time with it if I can. And this right here is a massive project I'm undertaking that's probably going to take an incredible amount of time, but we have moved on to the 1911. In a previous video, I talked about the 1873 and how the 1911 replaced the 1873. I did not talk about the double action versions of revolvers that the United States military ended up adopting alongside the 1873 as well. The 1911 also replaced those double action revolvers. So the 1911 is chambered in 45 ACP. I'm sure everyone who watches this video probably knows that. This is a 230 grain projectile traveling at about 850 or so feet per second, and it is designed to mimic the capabilities of the 45 Colt or 45 long Colt cartridge. Now, originally, whenever the 1911 was adopted by United States military forces, they had a 38 caliber projectile that was being utilized by military forces. They also still had their 1873s in stock with forces that were still using 45 long Colt. I think it was deemed that the 38 caliber was too anemic. Is that the word I'm looking for? It was not powerful enough for the United States liking, so they wanted to go ahead and adopt a semi-automatic self-loading handgun, because during the time period, self-loading technology was becoming more predominant, since smokeless powder had just been invented not long ago, and this was cutting-edge technology. They wanted a 45 caliber projectile to be fired from that self-loading semi-automatic handgun. So John Browning, of all people, decided to himself, you know what, let's go ahead and give them something worthwhile. So the development, the design of this handgun originally started in the late 1800s, I think the late 1890s, sometime around that time period. But John Browning essentially had, very similar to this system, already created during that time period, and there were a bunch of different variations of the 1911 in previous generations, previous models, like the model 1900 and the pocket hammerless, and there's just probably about a dozen or so orientations of this handgun before it was adopted by U.S. military service in 1911. Now, like I said, this particular one is a 1911 A1 variant, so this is not indicative of what would have been adopted during that time period, but it's close enough to serve for representation purposes. What this is it is a single stack magazine-fed self-loading rifle that operates off of a tilting barreled action, and we can see that happen as I pull the slide back. You can see the barrel just barely tilt downward as it unlocks. That is a delayed blowback system, because 45 ACP is a beast of a cartridge. It is obviously hammer fired, which you can see on the rear of the slide right there. It does have a grip safety on it, so you have to depress that in order to drop said hammer. The sights on it leave a lot to be desired if we're just talking about standard military GI sights. Besides that, there's not a whole lot else to say about it. It does have a safety, a thumb safety right here on the left side of our frame right here. It is an all steel frame, and it is a very well-known handgun here in the United States. This served U.S. military forces from 1911 upon its adoption and replacement of the single-action armies and those double-action 38 caliber revolvers, and it saw use until its replacement in 1985 or 1986 by the M9 Beretta, which is a double-stack 9mm, and we'll probably talk about that in a later video, although I don't actually have one. That's still probably something I should talk about with this series. So we went from single action and double action revolvers in 45 long Colt and 38 to self-loading 45 ACP, and this right here has become a very beloved handgun ever since then. So we're going to go ahead and send some rounds downrange, and well, put a couple of rounds onto an old microwave that I have sitting out here in a field. So we're going to put some rounds downrange, and then after we're done with our shooting portion, I'll go ahead and disassemble this, and I'll show you guys how it actually functions inside of the handgun itself. and we'll take a look at the actual tilting barrel design. I do want to point out that our magazine here, I've only got 4 rounds because I'm poor and I got to stretch my ammunition out for future videos. But the magazine for this particular model sets out, it's not flush with the bottom of the grip on the bottom of the 1911 here. Your actual military spec 1911s had flush fit magazines on the bottom of their magazines, or on the bottom of their handguns. And they were a 7 capacity, so 7 plus 1 in the chamber for a grand total of 8 capacity. These are single action only systems, so they are known to be extremely accurate, since a single action only trigger has no springs that you have to fight, unlike a double action system. So these right here are renowned to be incredibly accurate and incredibly powerful handguns. They're definitely a very good design that uphold themselves very, very well even to this day, even though they are steel frame and very, very heavy, especially for the capacity that you get. Well, that's a whole argument for a whole other ball game. Let's go ahead and send some lead downrange with this thing. This particular one is a Rock Island Arsenal 1911, and it is one that I've already made videos on, so if you want to see more information on exactly this particular handgun and the story behind it, then go ahead and check out that video, which I'm sure you can find on my channel. Alright, so operation for your 1911 is something that I'm sure threw a lot of people off who were used to revolvers during the time period where this right here was being adopted. Very, very simple. All you do, you got yourself your magazine with X amount of ammunition. This operates basically the same way that most of your semi-automatic handguns are going to operate nowadays. There is a single chamber, unlike the 6 chambers inside of a revolver cylinder. There's a single chamber at the back of the barrel of the 1911, along with basically any other firearm that operates off of the Browning tilting barrel design. And whenever you load your magazine into your handgun, in this particular case 1911, you'll actually see the magazine sitting flush with the breech face and the chamber right here inside of said 1911. So whenever you drop the slide, we are actually going to have the breech face strip a round from the magazine and load it into the back of our barrel right there. We're not in battery because I did that really, really slow. Let me see if I can go ahead and pop us into battery there. But I did that extremely slow to go ahead and show how that functions. So normally you would want to just pull this back, slingshot it forward. This way it actually strips around and properly loads it into the chamber and puts it in battery. But the round is stripped from the magazine, puts it into the chamber of the firearm itself. And every time you fire, this slide cycles back and forth repeatedly, and there ejects a spent cartridge that was just fired. And as it goes forward, it loads a new one from the magazine into the back of the chamber. So if you have yourself any sort of semi-automatic and you only put a magazine inside of it, odds are it's not going to be ready to fire, especially if you're talking about a 1911 or Browning style design. So now I've got a microwave out there about 35, maybe 40 yards away. We're going to go ahead and put some 45 ACP ammunition downrange into that microwave. I do like the A1 version better than the 1911 version because hammer bite is not nearly as big of an issue. Although we do still have some pretty significant recoil with this 45 ACP. This is a pretty heavy handgun, but man, 45 ACP is just a beast of a cartridge. Alright, now this right here does lock open on an empty magazine. So, empty magazine, slide locks back, right here's your slide release, press that down, and your slide will pop forward. So, that is our 1911. Okay, let's go ahead and do a disassembly portion. Alright, disassembly of the 1911 is going to be fairly simple. Let's see if I can remember all the proper steps. It's been a little while since I've done this. Magazine out, confirm she is in fact unloaded. Fantastic. Okay, I'm pretty sure that our first step is to push this bushing in, and we should be able to rotate this locking bushing that holds our recoil bushing in. With lack of better knowledge for the terminology of these. There we go. This right here is a good representation. Here's our bushing turned sideways, and right there's our recoil spring bushing. So if we turn this sideways enough, our recoil spring bushing is going to just pop out along with our recoil spring, in theory. Alright, so recoil spring out, this thing comes off. I do know that we bring the slide back to this point here, and our little slide catch here pops out of the gun. And now, in theory, we should be able to just pull this right off of the frame, just like that. And right here is our recoil spring bushing, and right here is our barrel itself. Actually, I think the barrel itself on this model comes out the front. If I can get this bushing here off. There we go. She's a-coming. Perfect. Barrel itself comes out the front, unlike my various other Browning tilting barrels. But the way that the barrel itself works, we actually have a couple of, I guess you would call them locking lugs, locking recesses right there on the top of the barrel. The barrel itself sits inside of this thing, just like this, and it actually tilts up and down, just like this, as it locks and unlocks. With it locked, I cannot move the barrel, but if I tilt it downward just a little bit, now I can slide the barrel around, and that allows the slide to be able to move around on the barrel. So up, locked in place, does not move. Down, slides all over the place, nice and simply. And that right there is how the locking system on the 1911 works. Not exactly the cleanest disassembly I've ever done, but there you go. We have ourselves a disassembly, and you pretty much just put everything back together exactly the way that it was taken apart, just kind of in reverse. Alright, so thanks for watching, folks. I do appreciate your time. Very simple system. Not a whole lot to be said about it. Just to show off, here's the 1911 frame. Pull that trigger, hammer falls, and if the slide was there and it was loaded, then that right there would set off a cartridge. So that is the end of our 1911 video, so I'm going to go ahead and just do the outro, I suppose. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm going to reassemble my 1911 and continue to make videos because I'm having a really good time. So I'll see you on the next one. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.